Good afternoon, everyone. I'll give everyone a second to come into the webinar. Hello and welcome to the United States Department of Agriculture's Team Nutrition, the Road to Successful Menu Planning Training Series. My name is Patrick Butler and I'm an education and training specialist with the Institute of Child Nutrition. This training series is designed to help school food authorities and state agencies implement the nutrition standards based on the final rule, child nutrition programs, meal patterns consistent with the 2020-2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans. During today's webinar, all attendees will be muted. Questions can be asked by typing them into the question box on your screen. We'll try to answer as many as possible, but not all may be addressed due to time constraints. Please use the Q&A box only for questions for the presenter. After the webinar, a link to a short survey will appear within 24 hours. Completing this survey helps ICN plan future webinars. Registered individuals will receive a follow-up email within 24 hours containing a recording link on iLearn, ICN's online platform, and the survey link if you missed it. Webinar certificates will be emailed within 24 hours as well. Note that the slide deck will not be shared today. The webinar will be available only in video format within iLearn. I would like to introduce today's panelists, Brittany Gorman, Rachel Inman, Allison Butler, and Tim Vasquez.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you for that introduction, Patrick. Hi again, and welcome to another installment of our Road to Successful Menu Planning Training Series. I'm Brittany Gorman. I'm a nutritionist with Team Nutrition, and I have my fellow presenters here today that work in the School Meals Policy Division within Child Nutrition Programs at USDA's Food and Nutrition Service. In today's training, we'll take a deep dive into menu planning flexibilities for beans, peas, and lentils, vegetable subgroup, and school meals. This training counts toward USDA professional standards for school nutrition programs, Key Area 1000, Nutrition and Training Topic 1100, which is menu planning. Team Nutrition is an initiative of USDA Food Nutrition Service, and we support child nutrition programs, including the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. So give me a thumbs up if you've heard of Team Nutrition before. Okay, great. So the goal, if I have any that has not heard of Team Nutrition, the goal of Team Nutrition is we're here to improve children's lifelong eating and physical activity habits through nutrition education based on the principles of the Dietary Guidelines for Americans in My Plate. And we do so through training and technical assistance for those preparing and serving meals, providing nutrition education for children, and building support for healthier school and childcare environments. So in today's presentation, we're focusing on the beans, peas, and lentils subgroup, which is one of our 5 vegetable subgroups here for the school meals, shown in the middle. And I like to say this is the most versatile as it can credit toward 2 different meal components, not at the same time, of course. Now, foods in this vegetable subgroup include beans like kidney beans and pinto beans, dried peas, chickpeas, split peas, and lentils, as well as edamame, which is the fresh green soybean. And the nutrition found in beans, peas, and lentils are similar to foods in both vegetable food group and the meats and meat alternate food group. So like vegetables, beans, peas, and lentils are great sources of fiber, folate, and potassium. And like meats and meat alternates, they're also great sources of plant-based protein, and they provide iron and zinc. So the minimum amount to serve per week at school lunch is a half a cup, but we'll get into the details of that And so I'm going to hand it over to Rachel Inman, and she's going to go into more detail and cover the menu planning flexibility for beans, peas, and lentils.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Brittany. In April of 2024, USDA published the final rule, Child Nutrition Programs, Meal Patterns Consistent with the 2020-2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, which updated school nutrition requirements. The final rule includes several new menu planning flexibilities available for use this school year. Program operators can use these flexibilities to create new recipes and menus to meet cultural preferences and offer more vegetarian choices. One of these menu planning flexibilities, the beans, peas, and lentils flexibility at lunch, is the focus of our training today. I will first provide an overview of the flexibility, review how beans, peas, and lentils contribute to a reimbursable meal, show an example lunch menu, and then quiz you all on what you've learned. The table on the slide provides a comparison of the previous and current regulations to show how the final rule changed this flexibility at lunch. The final rule changed the name of the legumes vegetable subgroup to the beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup for consistency with the terminology used in the dietary guidelines. The rule only changed the name of the vegetable subgroup, and it didn't change any of the foods within this vegetable subgroup. Under the final rule, schools are still required to offer vegetables from all 5 vegetable subgroups over the course of the week at lunch. Schools still need to offer a half a cup of beans, peas, and lentils over the course of the week to meet the vegetable subgroup requirement. And schools still get to determine which meal component beans, peas, and lentils credit towards, the vegetables or the meat alternate meal component. So now you might be wondering, how did the final rule change this flexibility? The final rule allows schools to now count those beans, peas, and lentils offered as a meat alternate at lunch towards the weekly beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup requirement, which we will go into more detail later. This new option is intended to support schools that wish to offer more plant-based and vegetarian options towards that meat alternate meal component. To learn more about the final rule, the QR code on this slide will take you to the final rule webpage, which contains many resources. Now that we have an overview of the flexibility, let's dive into how beans, peas, and lentils contribute to a reimbursable meal. So first, we are going to review the daily meal component requirements. Daily, schools must offer all 5 meal components, including the meat alternate and vegetables for a reimbursable meal. Schools get to determine which meal component beans, peas, and lentils count towards at lunch, either the meat alternates meal component or the vegetables meal component, but not both meal components at the same time, because that would be double counting. It's really important to avoid double counting meal components from a nutritional standpoint, because it results in missing a meal component and reduces overall calories. A nutritious lunch includes a variety of foods from all 5 food groups to provide kids the calories they need for energy and the nutrients they need to promote growth and reduce the risk of chronic disease. Beans, peas, and lentils offered as a meat alternate do not also count towards the daily or weekly vegetable meal component requirements. So when schools credit beans, peas, and lentils as a meat alternate, they still need to offer additional vegetables to meet the daily and weekly vegetable meal component requirements. What if a school offers 2 servings of beans, peas, or lentils during a meal? Can 1 serving count as a vegetable and 1 serving count as a meat alternate? Yes. The menu planners do have the discretion when beans, peas, and lentils are offered as 2 separate dishes in the same meal. 1 serving may count as a vegetable and 1 may count as a meat alternate. For example, if a menu includes a black bean and cheese burrito as the entree and a bean salad as a side, the beans in the side dish can count as a vegetable, and the black beans in the burrito may count as a meat alternate. Now that we reviewed the daily meal component requirements, we will cover the weekly vegetable subgroup requirement. Weekly, schools must offer vegetables from all 5 subgroups in the school lunch meal pattern, including the requirement to offer half a cup of beans, peas, and lentils. The final rule allows schools that credit beans, peas, and lentils towards the meat alternate meal component to now also credit towards the weekly beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup requirement. Now that we've reviewed the daily meal component requirements and weekly vegetable subgroup requirements, let's apply this to an example using a lunch menu offered to students in grades K to 5. This lunch features a vegetarian chili for the entree. The tray also includes a whole grain roll, baked potato, broccoli, salad, honeydew, and a choice of milk. The vegetarian chili recipe is an ICN recipe, and you can scan the QR code on the slide to access it. The chart on the right shows the meal pattern requirements for grades K to 5. The tray features vegetarian chili for the entree, and the kidney beans in the chili can count as a meat alternate or a vegetable, but not as both. It's up to the menu planner to decide. In this example, the menu planner has decided to count the 1/4 cup of kidney beans in the chili as a meat alternate, which meets the 1 ounce daily requirement for the meat alternate meal component. Since the menu planner is counting the beans in the chili as a meat alternate, they need to offer additional vegetables to meet the daily vegetables meal component requirement of 3/4 a cup. The salad, broccoli, baked potato, and tomatoes, onions, and peppers in the chili are offered to meet the vegetables meal component requirement. Now that the daily meal component requirements have been met, we can turn to looking at the weekly vegetable subgroup requirements. The beans and the chili also count towards the weekly beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup requirement. Now that we've walked through the example, it's your turn to practice. On this tray, the school is offering a teriyaki bowl with chicken, edamame, brown rice, broccoli, carrots, and cantaloupe. Let's say this is a high school lunch and there's 1 ounce equivalent of chicken and a 1/4 a cup of edamame, which credits as a 1 ounce equivalent. So this meets the daily requirement for meat alternates. The bowl also includes a 1/2 a cup of carrots and 1/2 a cup of broccoli. If the edamame is offered towards the meat alternate meal component, can it also count towards the weekly requirement to offer a 1/2 a cup of beans, peas, and lentils? If you want to give a thumbs up, write in the chat what you think it is. All right, I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, and yes, that is correct. The 1 ounce equivalent of edamame can also count towards the weekly requirement to offer a 1/2 a cup of beans, peas, and lentils. And so in this example, the school would only need to offer a 1/4 a cup of beans, peas, and lentils to satisfy the weekly subgroup requirement. This example emphasizes the importance of knowing that when you offer beans, peas, and lentils as a meat alternate, you also need to serve additional vegetables to meet the daily and weekly vegetable meal component requirements. So it's the broccoli and carrots in this example. All right, we have 1 more. So it's going to be time for a second pop quiz. This meal includes pinto beans in a bean and cheese pupusa entree with refried beans, baby carrots, kiwi, and orange wedges as sides. Can the school count the pinto beans in the pupusa entree towards the meat alternate meal component and the refried beans in the side dish towards the vegetable component? Do both credit towards the weekly beans, peas, and lentils subgroup requirement? I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, a lot of hearts, and yes, that is correct. Because these are 2 distinct portions of beans, peas, and lentils, the pinto beans and the pupusa entree can count as a meat alternate, and the refried beans and the salad can count towards vegetables, and both credit towards the weekly subgroup requirements. So this example really emphasizes how schools can offer beans, peas, and lentils in 2 separate dishes as part of the same meal. The menu planner has the discretion to count one serving as a vegetable and one as a meat alternate. It's really just important to be consistent in how you credit your beans, peas, and lentils and train staff on how they credit towards a reimbursable meal. And now my colleague, Allison Butler, will go over some frequently asked questions about beans, peas, and lentils.
Oop, sorry about that. Thank you so much, Rachel. Now we're going to jump into some frequently asked questions. So just like before, yes is a thumbs up, down is a thumbs down is a no. As we hop into these, and for the open-ended ones, you can go ahead and place that in the chat. So we'll move into our first question. All right, can beans in chili, can beans in a chili count toward the vegetable component and the meat alternates component? Interesting. I see a lot of thumbs up. So the answer to this one is no. If you offer beans as a meat alternate, if you offer beans as a meat alternate, they can also count toward the weekly beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup requirement. However, the beans can't count toward the daily and weekly amounts of vegetables for the vegetable component. It's important to note that if a meal includes two distinct portions of beans, peas, and lentils, one portion can count toward the meat alternate component, and the other can count toward the vegetable component, and both can count toward the weekly subgroup requirement for beans, peas, and lentils. All right, let's go to our next question. What is the minimum amount of beans, peas, and lentils that can count toward the weekly beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup requirement? So this one you guys can pop in the chat. All right, so for this one, the beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup, 1/8 cup is the minimum visibly recognizable amount needed for the required 1/2 ounce equivalent of meat alternates. So this 1/8 of a cup of beans, peas, and lentils as a meat alternate is the minimum amount that can be applied toward the weekly 1/2 cup of beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup requirement. All right, let's move on to another one. Do green peas credit toward the beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Oh, there is no thumbs down. All right, let's go with the laughing face for our nose then. All right, there we go. All right, so no, green peas and green lima beans are fresh, immature vegetables. So the beans and peas included in beans, peas, and lentils subgroup that can count as either a vegetable or a meat alternate are dry mature. So mature refers to it being developed on the plant, and the pod is dry, usually turning it from green to the mature color, so it can be stored as a dried bean. The only exception to this is that fresh, immature green soybeans or edamame can be used as either a vegetable or a meat alternate. And it can count toward the beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup due to its nutrient profile. All right, let's go to our next one. This one's a tricky one. So can a pasta made out of lentil flour credit toward the beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup? Okay, I see lots of reactions. All right, so the answer for this one is pasta products made out of 100% legume flours may credit as a vegetable or a meat alternate, but not as both in the same meal. These pasta products also count toward the weekly beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup requirement regardless of how you choose to credit them as a meal component. When you're crediting pasta made out of legume flours toward the meat alternate meal component, it must be offered with additional visually recognizable meat alternates, such as tofu, cheese, or meat. However, when crediting pasta made out of legume flours toward the vegetable meal component, it is not required for the pasta to be served with another visually recognizable vegetable. Okay, that one was a little bit tricky. Next question. Can a bar primarily made with chickpea flour credit toward the meat alternate component and count towards the weekly beans, peas, and lentils subgroup requirement? All right, I see my reactions here, my thumbs up and my laughing faces. Thanks for rolling with that. All right, so for this question, the bar must contain at least 1/8 of a cup of chickpeas that are visually recognizable in order to count toward the meat alternate component and the weekly bean, peas, and lentil requirement. So a bar with nut or seed butter may only contribute toward the meat alternates component and must also have 1/4 ounce equivalent of visually recognizable nuts and seeds. All right, next question. Can extra beans, peas, and lentils count toward the total cups of vegetable requirement per week? Is this only after the vegetable subgroup quantities have been met? All right, see lots of thumbs up. So the answer to this one is yes. The meal pattern at 7 CFR 2010.10c outlines the minimum quantities of food that may be credited and counted as the vegetables per week and by day per age grade group. And for additional vegetables to reach the total, the meal pattern chart outlines that 1 cup of required for grades K through 5 and grades 6 through 8, and 1.5 cups is required for grades 9 to 12. The additional vegetables from any subgroup to reach the total requirement may be met with any additional amounts of dark green, red, orange, beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup. There are no maximum amounts of vegetables that can be offered, and program operators may serve additional vegetables once the vegetable subgroup requirements are met if meals, on average, meet the weekly dietary specifications for calories, saturated fat, sodium, and beginning in school year 2027-2028, added sugars. All right, now we're going to hop into some implementation strategies. So offer versus serve or OVS requirements do not change under this flexibility, nor is OVS impacted by this flexibility. For OVS at lunch, a school must still offer all 5 meal components daily and offer vegetables from all 5 vegetable subgroups over the week in the amount specified by the meal pattern requirements. Offer versus serve applies to daily student selections, and there is no requirement that a student select each vegetable subgroup. To qualify as a reimbursable OVS lunch, a student must select at least 3 meal components, one of which must be at least 1/2 cup of fruit and or vegetable. If a school offers a meal component, if a school offers a menu item with beans, peas, and lentils to meet the meat alternate meal component for lunch, they must also offer fruit, milk, grains, and vegetable meal components. A student may decline up to any 2 meal components, except the meal is not reimbursable without at least 1/2 cup of fruit and or vegetable. We also got a lot of questions about multiple serving lines. So to break this down, daily, all serving lines are required to provide students access to all 5 meal components needed for a reimbursable meal. Weekly, schools must make sure that each serving line offers all the vegetable subgroups to ensure that all students have access to all vegetable subgroups throughout the week, regardless of the serving line that that student selects. If a school chooses to limit vegetable choices by entrees over the course of the week, the school needs to make sure that each serving line offers all the vegetable subgroups over the course of the week. So this requirement can be accomplished in many different ways, but a few good approaches would be serving each vegetable subgroup on each serving line, but on different days of the week. Or you could serve the same vegetable subgroups on each serving line as a side on the same days. Or another great way to do this is by offering all the vegetable subgroups at a centrally located salad bar for all students to access. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Brittany.
Great. Thank you, Allison. So I'm going to wrap up today's presentation, spending some time going over some more menu planning strategies, as well as some resources from Team Nutrition. So here on this slide, I've got a lot of great photos that are from program operators. Maybe some of you are with us today, all across the country, to kind of help visualize how versatile beans, peas, and lentils can look on the lunch line. Now, at this point, I hope you've heard of the Healthy Meals Incentives Initiative. We've been trying to talk about it and promote it quite a bit over the past couple of years. But we have kind of two sides. We have the Healthy Meals Incentives Initiative recognition awardees, as well as the School Food System Transformation Challenge subgrants. It's quite a mouthful. But on both sides of the Healthy Meals Incentives or HMI initiative, we've had some really great success showcasing new menu items, showing the versatile beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup. So just a couple examples of ways that they're being incorporated into school meals. And what I'm going to share kind of two success stories that we have, none from these examples. These are some of our HMI initiative recognition awardees. But we have two great projects in the School Food System Transformation Challenge. And one of the projects is called the Common Market, and that's in the Great Lakes region. And they're partnering with the manufacturer as well as with local schools to test out products made by blending regional black beans and beef. And then the first product that they tested was a black bean and beef hamburger patty. And that was a huge hit. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what other products they create. And another big success we had was out of Boston, Massachusetts and Portland, Maine. Their public schools, they've been working on this field fritter with a manufacturer, and this field fritter is made from yellow field peas, and they are turning that into a plant-based entree for not only the local school districts, but local community as well. So very exciting stuff. Now, earlier, Allison cleared up a lot of our frequently asked questions that we get regarding implementation of the flexibility. And you just saw some really great photo inspiration. So now I'm hoping maybe you're interested in how do you incorporate more beans, peas, and lentils in your menu? So some ways you may want to consider doing that through new menu options would, of course, be student surveys, kind of gauging their interest, maybe ideas, things that they're looking forward to seeing on the lunch line, and taste testing some bean, pea, and lentil recipes. And from earlier, another great way is incorporating beans, peas, and lentils in combination with meat, kind of like that burger. So you could do that in tacos or in soups. You can also try out pasta products. We mentioned that earlier, made of bean, pea, and lentil flour. And of course, any of these incorporating new recipes or new products into your lunch line, you want to make sure you're training staff on the preparation of the new recipes, which ICN has a ton of great resources for that. And of course, providing nutrition education on foods while being mindful and respectful of other cultures. And in order to implement these strategies, Team Nutrition has resources and trainings that I hope make you feel like this is an approachable concept. So I'm going to start with accrediting tip sheets for the child nutrition programs. Now, we recently revised these for the final rule, and they were released in English and in Spanish last fall or end of summer. So we have a tip sheet for each meal component, with the exception being grains. There are 3 separate ones because grains can be a complicated once we go into that one into more detail in terms of program requirements, what is whole grain rich. And of course, with beans, peas, and lentils being able to credit toward the meat alternate or the vegetables component, we have these 2 tip sheets highlighted here. They include great references on program-specific requirements, not only for school meals, but also CACFP and summer. And the meal pattern charts are included in them, as well as some more helpful question and answer sections. And like I mentioned, we do have the entire series also available in Spanish, and I'm going to show you in just a little bit how to navigate to all of our Spanish materials. Now, if you want a little bit of more detail on crediting that maybe you don't get in the crediting tip sheets, which are meant to be super easy and concise resource, I do need to mention we have a really helpful tool. I hope you've heard of it before, the Food Buying Guide for Child Nutrition Programs. And this helps you calculate the amount of food to purchase, determine meal pattern contribution of a standardized recipe. And it's available, of course, on the web, as well as a downloadable PDF if you prefer to work off of that. And then, of course, we have it as a mobile app, which is free. And you can access it as a guest user if you don't happen to have a login.gov account or don't feel like doing that. So you can always, that's always an option, but I really do recommend using a login.gov account. That way you can access all the features like the recipe analysis workbook and the ability to save shopping list and favorite food items, just to name a few. And of course, I don't have time to go into detail into the food buying guide. I could talk about that for a whole nother hour, but I would like to mention the FBG calculator within the food buying guide. And with that, you can create a shopping list to assist program operators in determining the amount of food to purchase for their programs. And as you're creating a shopping list, you do have the option of viewing the meal pattern requirements by program and age or grade group. So that's a really helpful tip if you do use this, and it is available in both the web tool and the mobile app. Now you may be wondering, hey, I see the old vegetable subgroup name here. Yes, we are working on getting that updated. So in the next couple months, you'll see, and we'll of course send an announcement out, that will be updated. But if you do download the PDF, the new vegetable subgroup name is already reflected in that. Now, if you want to learn more about the food buying guide, the Institute of Child Nutrition has really great learning modules for learning to use not only the calculator, but other features within the FBG. And we're in the process of updating a lot of those interactive learning modules. And we also recently, I think there was 2 webinars with ICN last year on their iLearn portal on the food buying guide that take a deeper dive into the tool as a whole, as well as a separate one on the recipe analysis workbook. USDA has a variety of kid-tested standardized recipes, and many of these do feature beans, peas, and lentils, so you'll find nutrition information and meal pattern contribution statements that make using these recipes a pretty easy choice. And the ICN's Child Nutrition Recipe Box has a bunch of cool features. They've really done a lot of work over with the search function the past year or so to make finding the perfect recipe pretty easy. And you can even do a filter for beans, peas, and lentils. You can refine by sodium content and even total cook time. And USDA standardized Team Nutrition recipe page also has quick links to the state agency developed recipes, as well as recipe standardization guides. We also have the Meal Talk webinar series, and this highlights resources and materials that address the hot topics, including reducing added sugars, honoring cultural diversity, taste tests, and local school wellness policies. And this webpage has webinars and even PowerPoint slides to download and use. Now, today's presentation, as we mentioned at the beginning, is a part of the Road to Successful Menu Planning for School Meals training series. So in addition to these 60-minute webinars that we're doing, we also have a series of 15-minute on-demand trainings that can be taken separately or in combination of any other trainings. So these are designed to be really quick training videos on topics like reducing added sugars, which we have, I believe, 4 on. And then we're working on translating them into Spanish. And then very, very soon, you can expect some new shorter videos on menu planning topics, one of those being after school snack program. So that's very exciting. And I encourage you to check this page. You can easily access, I see I'm shaking it up here as well, if you're looking for training materials on reducing sodium. So we'll be promoting that continued throughout the next couple of months. And staying on trend, talking about reducing added sugars and sodium in school meals, we have 2 guides that include crediting information, sample menus, and success stories to inspire menu planning. That's offering meats and meat alternate at school breakfast and reducing added sugars at school breakfast. And these are both available in English and Spanish. Now, Team Nutrition makes many other resources that I don't have time to go into today or share. And we have a lot available in both English and Spanish, and we're really continuing to expand our Spanish offerings. As I mentioned, our Road to Successful Menu Planning training series, I think we have 4 Spanish short videos that are coming out. So on this slide, you can see how the Spanish web feature looks. So when we do have a page on our Team Nutrition site that's available in Spanish, and here I'm using the crediting tip sheets as an example. In order to change the language to Spanish, you'll just in that top right corner, click on the word language. And you can go back and forth, toggle back and forth to English and Spanish. When you're in Spanish, it says idiomas. And if you're using a mobile device, you will need to click the word menu. It'll be a little bit more condensed. So you'll click menu at the top of the right side of the web page, and then the languages will populate there. And the last 2 resources I want to mention are currently under revision to reflect the Child Nutrition Program's meal patterns consistent with the 2020-2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans Final Rule. But there's still a really good menu planning resource to use in the interim while we're updating. Now, the menu planner for school meals, which you can get, that is a adorable QR code on the left, that orange. That'll take you there. And that covers information on nutrition, food safety, farm to school, USDA foods, seasonal foods, marketing, and even administrative review. And this resource has 7 chapters, and they're standalone chapters. And they have an introduction, a quiz with the answer key, glossary, and appendices for the resource as a whole. Additionally, I know Allison covered offer versus serve a little earlier. We do have breakfast and lunch posters for elementary, middle, and high school students. So that's that the tray QR code will take you to those materials. And you can use these posters as signage to instruct students on how to select a reimbursable meal under offer versus serve. And our offer versus serve materials also include tip sheets to help school nutrition staff enhance their understanding of offer versus serve requirements at breakfast and lunch. And they include an overview of offer versus serve as well as some hands-on practice. So we've got materials for the serving line and for students as well as staff. Again, we are revising these. I don't have a date at this time, but stay tuned. So lastly, if you want to learn more about team nutrition or maybe stay up to date on when we're revising or releasing new materials, please do sign up for our newsletter or reach out to us at Team Nutrition at USDA.gov. I really want to take this time to thank the ICN for the opportunity to come here and share this with you, but also a huge thank you to you and all the other school nutrition providers out there. You're doing amazing work to keep our kids nourished and ready to learn. So thank you, thank you. And I'm going to now let Tim take over of our live question and answer portion.
Thank you, Brittany. I have a few questions that I have answered in writing that we'll go over after we've had an opportunity for me to sort of give the three of you a chance to answer some of the questions. I think I have one that Rachel would like to answer. It is one from Lisa. The question is, I'm confused about being able to count the edamame towards the meat alternate and the vegetable subgroup. Isn't that double counting? Rachel, how do you explain it?
Yeah, so thanks for that. That's a really good question. Definitely has come up a lot. When you're thinking about double counting edamame would occur if it was counted towards both the meat alternate meal component and the vegetable meal component in the same meal. So it would result in missing a meal component at lunch that day. So when you're thinking about crediting that edamame towards the weekly subgroup, you're kind of just checking the box at meeting the requirement to offer a variety of vegetables, and you still will be serving, you'll still have to serve a different vegetable that day to meet the vegetable meal component requirements. Hopefully that helps clear it up.
And I'll add too that the edamame is a fresh soybean. It's green. It isn't allowed to mature on the vine. But because edamame or soybeans are higher in protein than most any other beans, whether it's fresh or dry, it's the only exception to the rule for fresh vegetables, for fresh beans, peas, and lentils that can count as either a meat alternate and a vegetable. So you're not double counting it. It's just the one fresh bean that has the opportunity to serve as either one of those components in a reimbursable meal, but not ever both in the same meal. So it is not actually double counting. And I hope that between the two answers, that is good and helps to explain that. I have one that Brittany had said that she would like to answer. That is that from Darlene. The question is, are the offer versus serve materials available in other languages for students?
Yes, I am happy to report all of our offer versus serve materials that we have are available in both English and Spanish. And I don't think I mentioned that earlier, so thanks for that question. Again, when we do the revision, and it's going to be very minor that we're working on to freshen them up, we will also have those revised in English and Spanish as well.
Thank you, Brittany. I have one that Allison would like to answer. The question is, and it's possible that Allison can provide more context to the question, because the question probably makes more sense if we're looking at that slide. And also, while I'm thinking about it, one of our attendants would like to see the QR code that goes to our final rule page. So if we can bring that QR code back up, or if you happen to have a slide with all of the QR codes, maybe we can have that on display while we're doing questions and answers. But this question for Allison comes from Nancy. The question is this changed from how such pasta counted previously?
So there's no change to how the pasta credits, with the exception that now the flexibility from the final rule allows pasta made from a lentil or a bean flour, any bean, pea, and lentil flour, to also credit toward the weekly subgroup requirement for beans, peas, and lentils. The piece that was getting probably a little bit confusing that I'll repeat is when you credit pasta made of legume flours or beans, peas, and lentils as a meat alternate, it has to be accompanied by visually recognizable meat alternate. So you can do that through like tofu or cheese, or if you did like a marinara sauce with ground beef, that would count toward that, make it visually recognizable and allow you to credit your bean, pea, and lentil pasta as a meat alternate. Now, alternatively, if you're choosing to credit that pasta made of your legume flour, beans, peas, and lentils toward the vegetable meal component, it is not required that you accompany that pasta with another visually recognizable vegetable. So that visually recognizable requirement only comes into play for bean, pea, and lentil pasta when it is credited as a meat alternate. And in either situation, it still counts toward the weekly vegetable subgroup.
If I may, I'll add to that too, just because I might be reading into the question a little bit more. But in 2019, the Food and Nutrition Service did publish a policy memo that explains how pasta products that are made from vegetable flours like beans, peas, and lentils credit. The one chance we'd always credited pastas that are made from lentils or any type of beans, peas, and lentil flour before. The one change that policy does make is that is the only example when you have a food that is posing as a different kind of food, like a noodle made from vegetables. Typically, you would find noodles made from grains. So I call it an impasta or an imposter food. And the change that policy allows that was not allowed before is to allow the legume pasta, beans, peas, and lentils pasta, to credit without having to have a visibly recognizable amount of beans, peas, or lentils in that dish as an integral part of it. So that's the one change. And the reason that we made that change is because we do want to provide more opportunities for menu planners to put bean, peas, and lentil products in front of students. And we want to be able to have more vegetarian options available. And so that policy holds, though, if you wanted to count that bean, pea, and lentil pasta as a meat alternate, in that case, we would want there to be some visibly recognizable amount of meat alternates like cheese or meat, etc. And so that's an important distinction. And I think there were some other questions about this visibly recognizable requirement. And I think people could be possibly overthinking it. It really does pertain to foods that are posing as other foods. Like you can make a really nutrient-rich macaroni and cheese by making a cheese sauce from cheddar cheese that also has an orange vegetable in it, like butternut squash, for example. By doing that, you're serving less cheese and therefore less saturated fat. You're improving the nutrient profile of that dish. You're getting students to stealthily consume butternut squash, except that we do require you to include some visibly butternut squash in it because the cheese sauce is posing as something that it doesn't look like. So as long as you keep that in mind, that really that visibly recognizable amount, the purpose of it is kind of twofold. It is, because when you make, let's say your mashed potatoes don't look like potatoes. Chicken nuggets don't look like chickens. But those are, people typically understand that that's what that food is. But when you're specifically doing something that misrepresents the food is when it's important to put something in front of the child so that they recognize that those things that are being hidden in the recipe are there and they can recognize them and learn to taste them and know what they are. Moving on, I'd want to send Rachel a question from Leah. Do green beans meet the requirement for beans, peas, and lentils?
So that is a good question. So green beans are actually part of the other vegetables subgroup, and so they would credit towards that subgroup weekly.
Great. I would like to go ahead and take an answer or a question from Nicole. I mean, well, it just changed. Actually, the question is from Vertina. I've been serving baked beans as a meat alternative and counting it as one of the 5 food groups. Is that okay? Yeah. Baked beans are beans, peas, and lentils, and they typically canned beans are cooked from dry beans, and because they're not fresh, baked beans can count as either a meat alternate or a vegetable at the discretion of the menu planner. Let's see. This question is from Nicole. I'll see if any of the panelists would like to answer it. So if beans in a burrito count as meeting the legume subgroup, would French fries paired with nuggets meet the starchy subgroup? If we don't have a taker, I can take it. Again, the question is, so if beans in a burrito count as meeting the legume subgroup, would French fries paired with nuggets meet the starchy subgroup? Yes, French fries are always in the starchy vegetable subgroup. They don't ever count as anything other than starchy vegetables. I hope that helps. Donald has a question about noodles that have been made from sweet potatoes, sweet potato starch for centuries, but it seems the fiber vegetable portion isn't used in the noodle. Well, maybe that's not really a question other than just sort of a statement. And I have not seen noodles made from sweet potato starch, but that's an interesting concept. Rachel, Meyer has a question. Could you explain better or talk about more why green beans, green peas, and snow snap peas and similar don't credit as beans, peas, and lentils?
Yeah, that's a really good question that we've received a lot. So the reason why green peas, green beans, snow peas do not credit as bean, peas, and lentils is due to their nutrition. So their nutrition is similar to more other vegetable subgroups. So when we think of beans, peas, and lentils, they are really good sources of fiber and folate, potassium, and they're really good sources of protein. And green beans and green peas lack a lot of the protein that is in other beans, peas, and lentils.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm reading a question that I think is worth answering. I just want to make sure that it's that we can extrapolate what's being asked. I'll read it out loud. Maybe one of the panelists understands the question, and as I read it more, maybe it'll become more clear to me. One of the attendees says, I understand that we can count the beans, peas, and lentils as both the vegetable and the meat alternate components in the same meal. But then how do the beans counted as the meat alternate then contribute towards the vegetable subgroup minimums? I think, Rachel, that's one that you can handle, I'm sure. Would you like me to read it to you one more time?
Oh yeah, no, I see it. So okay. Beans, peas, and lentils. So if you so for the subgroup minimums, it will contribute towards that weekly half a cup. So if you offer beans as a meat alternate on Wednesday, let's say you're offering a bean burrito and you offer let's say you offer a 1 ounce equivalent, which is 1/4 of a cup, that would then contribute the 1/4 a cup towards that weekly requirement to serve a half of a cup. So it would kind of count towards the vegetable subgroup requirements. Think of it as like offering a variety of different vegetables to kids. And so by offering the beans, you're kind of helping to contribute. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, you're not double counting really. You're serving a bean burrito. You're meeting the meat alternate requirement with the beans because they're dry beans, and where the flexibility is that meat alternate that you've served as a bean also can count towards your weekly requirement. It's not counting towards your or your daily vegetable requirement. It's counting towards that weekly beans, peas, and lentil requirement. Here's a question about refried beans. Do they count as a meat alternate and then also as beans, peas, lentil category?
Yes, you have the choice. So you can choose to credit them as a meat alternate or a vegetable meal component. And then regardless of how you choose to count them as a meal component, they also credit toward the weekly vegetable subgroup requirement, just to ensure that we have enough variety in the types of vegetables kiddos are getting served.
Thank you.
I saw a question about whether that was going to reduce the amount of times or the amount of times that beans, peas, and lentils are served throughout the week. It shouldn't. The requirement is still the same for how often they're served. My understanding, and Tim has tons of historical knowledge, is that the beans, peas, and lentils vegetable subgroup was one of the harder ones for program operators to meet. So this is some encouragement that whether you choose to serve it as a vegetable or a meat alternate, it's still appearing on the menu. The kiddos are still seeing that variety. And so when you serve beans, peas, and lentils, credit it as a meat alternate, count it toward the vegetable subgroup, there's still a requirement that other vegetables have to be served. So there's no missing out. Hopefully it encourages more beans, peas, and lentils to end up on the menu.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. When we pitched this in the proposed rulemaking, we received feedback. Most everyone agreed that beans, peas, and lentils were a challenge for students. They weren't, we weren't selecting them as often as we'd all like them to. And this just gives us an ability to make sure that we're putting the beans in front of them. And when you do that, you're getting credit for having done that for the weekly requirement, not the daily requirement. Well, and the daily requirement is for the, vegetable or the meat alternate. There isn't a daily vegetable subgroup requirements. Those subgroups are made so that you have a weekly requirement that you have to meet, and they differ in volumes, and menu planners often will, have different amounts of beans throughout the week. Here's a question. If soy protein is being used as a meat alternate in a vegetarian entree to meet the meat alternate daily component, will it also count towards the weekly beans, peas, and lentil vegetable subgroup? Rachel is typing an answer to that one, so you'll be able to see that when you scroll through the written answers that we've provided. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, there are many questions that I was answering during the presentation. You can find that at the top of the question just by tapping on the answered questions and the question and answer box. How are we doing on time, panelists?
Looks like we have one more minute.
Okay. There's a question in here about software. I don't think any of us really know how to address that one. I think that's something you can talk to with your software provider. They may have some ideas for you. Oh, and here's a good question that we can probably end with. Virginia has a question about making lentil soup, offering lentil soup, will that count for a vegetable or a meat alternate? And I'll add too, just for let's say since all of us are here, let's say it's lentil soup that's been pureed. How would you handle that? Do they have does the menu planner have the option to serve that as either a vegetable or a meat alternate? And would they need to serve recognizable beans with that if it's pureed? If nobody wants to take it, I will, since I added to the question.
It's all yours, Tim.
All right. Well, this goes back to that imposter food. You know, black bean soup often comes with beans, whole beans in it. Sometimes black bean soup has been pureed. You can count black bean soup or any beans, peas, or lentil soup that is made from dried beans, peas, or lentils as either the vegetable or the meat alternate at the menu planner's discretion. And because you're not imposing, you're not making black bean soup and saying it's lasagna. So you don't have to have a recognizable bean in black bean soup or lentil soup if it's been pureed. I think that's a good place to stop.
Not just that, you can choose whether you want to count the lentils toward meat alternate or vegetables. Like you could choose that the whole soup will be a vegetable meal component and count toward whatever 1 cup with half a cup of beans, peas, and lentils, and half a cup of mixed other vegetables. Most lentil soups that I can think of have other, probably like potatoes or peppers or onions. And then alternatively, you can choose that your half cup of lentils will be a meat alternate, still counts toward the beans, peas, and lentil subgroup, and then your other vegetables will fulfill that need for the half cup of vegetables for the daily meal component requirement. So there's a lot of different ways. It's kind of choose your own adventure and trying to look at your menus and seeing where you need to complete the tray to meet all the daily and weekly meal requirements for your week.
Good add-on.
Yeah, it's a flexibility. Like it's a flexibility now. So it's up to the program operator to decide whether they'd like to use it and how it best works for their menus or choose not to.
Yeah, and let's end with another some more discussion about the recognizable amount, because I know that a lot of people struggle with that. I know that was something that I struggled with too when I first started learning about menu planning for schools. This is one that has come up many times. Tofu is made from whole beans, but it has no whole beans and it doesn't look like beans, but it is usually and customarily served as a meat alternate or a meat substitute. And so that product in and of itself does not have to be accompanied by visible beans for it to contribute to the meat alternate component. Now it's tofu and it does not get to count as a vegetable. It has to count towards the meat alternate. Because it is a meat analog, it is intended to be a meat substitute in many cases. To further that discussion, we had been asked if you wanted to substitute ricotta cheese in lasagna, for example, with minced tofu as the protein source, is that problematic with regard to the recognizable amount? We say no because tofu is usually and customarily used as a meat alternate. The ricotta cheese in the lasagna is used to meet the meat alternate component, especially if you're not putting ground beef or ground turkey in it. And so you could substitute ricotta cheese with tofu in your lasagna, and you could have that contribute to your meat alternate component. I think, and we all hope that's helps to sort of demystify the purpose of that long held policy that the Food and Nutrition Service has had for making sure that the kids know what they're eating when they're getting their plate. It does serve as sort of the first experience of nutrition education to see how much food is the right amount of food and what kind of food is the right kind of food to build healthy habits as they grow and start to choose their own foods and make their own meals.
Thanks so much for hosting our question and answer session, Tim. I think we are at 4:04, so I think it is time to say goodbye. Thank you so much to everyone for attending. And thank you to the ICN for hosting and my fellow USDA colleagues for joining me today.
Great to be with you all today.